After this conflict is concluded, we are going to have to re-examine that relationship. We're going to have to re-examine the value of NATO and that alliance for our country.
Firstly, NATO is the single most effective military alliance the world has ever seen. Secondly, that whatever the pressure on me and others, whatever the noise, I'm going to act in the British national interest in all the decisions that I make. And that's why I've been absolutely clear that this is not our war, and we're not going to get dragged into it.
I can't comment on that other than to say that there's nothing any government is doing or any country in the world is doing now to help Iran that is in any way impeding our mission. Do they have countries that have helped them in the past? Yes, they have. I mean, and by the way, Iran also helps other countries. There are messages being exchanged. There are talks going on. There is the potential for direct meeting at some point. We're always going to be open for that. So I think there's no doubt, unfortunately, after this conflict is concluded, we are going to have to re-examine that relationship. We're going to have to re-examine the value of NATO and that alliance for our country. Ultimately, that's a decision for the president to make, and he'll have to make it. We're going to finish the job here. As I said, we're very, very close to achieving our objectives on all of these things that I've outlined. But I do think, unfortunately, we are going to have to re-examine whether or not this alliance that has served this country well for a while is still serving that purpose, or is it now become a one-way street where America is simply in a position to defend Europe, but when we need the help of our allies, they're going to deny us basing rights and they're going to deny us overflight. It's only been 3 months. What's been achieved in Venezuela in just 3 months is nothing short of extraordinary. Ultimately, there will have to be a transition phase. There will have to be free and fair elections in Venezuela, and that point has to come. And that has to, it's not forever, but we have to be patient, but we also can't be complacent. And so I feel very good about the progress we've made in Venezuela in 3 months. And all the doomsdayers that were saying after Maduro was taken prisoner, as he should have been, and brought to justice. I think Cuba's in need of two things, economic reforms and political reform. You cannot fix their economy if you don't change their system of government. And but they're in a lot of trouble. There's no doubt about it. And, we'll have more news on that fairly soon. We're working on that as well.
President Trump has said this morning that he's considering pulling the US out of NATO. You've just talked about looking at a new long-term partnership with the EU, including on security. Is this an acknowledgement that Britain's long-term security relationship with the United States is about to change?
Well, let me say a number of things in response to that. Firstly, NATO is the single most effective military alliance the world has ever seen. And it has kept us safe for many decades, and we are fully committed to NATO. Secondly, that whatever the pressure on me and others, whatever the noise, I'm going to act in the British national interest in all the decisions that I make. And that's why I've been absolutely clear that this is not our war, and we're not going to get dragged into it. But I'm equally clear that when it comes to defence and security and our economic future, we have to have closer ties with Europe. That's why we had the summit last year. This year, as I've just announced, there'll be a further summit. We will make good on the commitments that we put in place last year, but we will also go further in relation to the alignment.
President Trump said yesterday that he wouldn't come to the aid of the UK anymore in his Truth Social post. How seriously do you take that threat from our main ally?
Well, it's very important that we're clear. There's been a good deal of pressure on me to change my position in relation to joining the war, and I'm not going to change my position on the war. So whatever the pressure, whatever the noise, I'm the British Prime Minister and I have to act in our national interests. I should say that on defence and security and intelligence, we're obviously working closely with the US, as we always do. And in relation to the planning on the Strait of Hormuz. Of course, that involves talking to the Americans as well. So, as I say, whatever the pressure, whatever the noise, my job is, as British Prime Minister, to concentrate on what's in the British national interest. That's what's guided me through this conflict so far. It will continue to guide me as we go forward.
Morning, Prime Minister. Look, most of the measures you're talking about were already in place before this war kicked off. So far, you seem reluctant to talk about specifics for help because of this war. And the criticism is that you've been dithering. So have you been dithering, or yes or no, do you have in mind a fixed set of plans for the hardest hit by the cost of living crisis caused by this war? And if so, when can we expect to hear them? What are the key indicators that will make you say, this is what we've got planned for you?
Yeah, let me just answer that. Firstly, a lot of the measures on the cost of living were measures that were taken at the budget last year, so we were ahead of this. Most people will be watching on their screens, worried about the damage they're seeing, the explosions they're seeing, the conflict, but they will also have this deep feeling inside, this could affect me. And what they mean by that is it could have an effect on the cost of living. We've been saying the cost of living is the single number one issue for a very long time. So it's not a coincidence that the measures coming into force today are on the cost of living, because I've been clear that that is the central issue, and that is I think for most people in the country, that's the thing they're probably worrying most about today. So we're actually ahead of the game in relation to that, because we took those measures at the budget. The only reason energy bills are coming down today by an average of £100 is because of the measures that we took at the budget, and they'll be down for 3 months. So those measures have been taken. In relation to what might be needed later in the year, obviously we're working through contingencies. A lot of it will depend on how long the conflict goes on, how quickly the straits are open, because it's very difficult to assess at the moment what might be needed, say, in the winter, until we know the answer to that question. So we're looking at a number of contingencies, as you would expect. I think it's important to point out that whilst there will always be a concern about energy bills, I think people will begin to really worry when it gets to the autumn energy bill, because the summer bill, which is the next one, tends to be, on average, about 7% of the energy people use. It doesn't mean they're not worried about it, but I think most people will be looking to what's the one that comes when it gets colder later in the year. So we're working across all of that. But in the end, the focus has to be on de-escalation and getting the strait open. And that begins to answer the question of what is the nature of any support that may be needed. Clearly, we want to make sure that we act for everybody in keeping the price down, the cost down. And today's measure on energy bills is a measure for everyone. But equally, in terms of tailoring support, we need to make sure that nobody is left behind here.